For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. Think about your typical workday. Think about what happens on your typical Monday or Tuesday working the 9 to 5. You wake up and you go to your job. Then you leave your job, still employed, and then you go to your home and sleep in your own bed. I just described the typical workday for the average American. For the average American, you're not leaving your place of work without a job, and then sleeping somewhere that you never intended to sleep. And as you can probably guess, the story that we're going to talk about today is not that of the typical American. The story that we're going to talk about today is, in fact, the exact opposite of that, where one man had the worst day ever and basically ended his career in the process. Because this man right here that you've been watching is Chicago Bears tight end Robin Earl. Odds are, unless you're a diehard Bears fan or you grew up in that era, this might be the first time you've ever heard of this man. However, today, he might be best known not for the things he did during his playing career, but rather for the things he did after his career was done. Because in a matter of one day, he went from a player who was likely going to play a part in Chicago's offense to a player who was out of the NFL and would never play again. It's a story that we're going to take a deep dive into today, and a story of how in a matter of one day, thanks to poor decision after poor decision, your entire life can flip and go completely upside down. Because this is the story of Robin Earl, who had one of the worst days of any player in NFL history, and at the very least, and at a bare minimum, one of the worst days in Chicago Bears history. Before I talk about the actual day in question, and just how bad it was all around, we need some context to understand just who Robin Earl was, and the kind of player that he was. Entering the 1983 season, Earl was going into his 7th season in the league, as the former third-round pick out of Washington from the 1977 NFL Draft had carved out quite the career thus far. In his first 3 seasons, he was used as a running back, primarily as one of the lead blockers for future Hall of Famer and one of the greatest running backs of all time, Walter Payton. After the 1979 season, he switched to tight end, which is the position in question that he was at entering the 1983 season. Head coach Mike Ditka came onto the scene in 1982, and Earl's playing time greatly diminished. In 1981, during the final season with Neil Armstrong as the head coach of the Bears, he started 15 out of a possible 16 games. In 1982, so Ditka's first season, out of 9 games during that strike-shortened campaign, he only started 1 and touched the ball 4 times, a career low across his 6 seasons. Still, Earl had his moments of brilliance where he looked like he could play a part in the offense. Obviously, you had his blocking abilities, where he was blocking for Walter Payton during the latter half of the 70s, and was a big reason why, in 1977, Payton led the NFL with 1,852 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns, winning MVP and Offensive Player of the Year honors. But you also had his ability to make plays in the passing game. In a 1980 game against the Minnesota Vikings, Earl scored the only touchdown of the game for the Bears. In front of a national television audience on Monday Night Football that same season against the Cleveland Browns, as in the number 2 seed in the AFC, Earl caught a team-high 5 passes for 63 yards and a touchdown. And he also scored a touchdown later in the year during Chicago's famous slaughtering of the Green Bay Packers, where the Bears annihilated them and won 61-7. Even despite Earl's loss of playing time under Ditka, it seemed as though Earl was going to be on the team heading into 1983. There were 4 tight ends that seemed to have a shot at making it onto the team, and you had a feeling that Ditka was going to keep 3. Alongside Robin Earl, you had Emory Moorhead, Jay Saldi, and Pat Dunsmore. It seemed, at least on paper, like Dunsmore was always going to be the odd one out. He was behind Earl on the depth chart, and to make matters worse, during the offseason, he tore his knee while skiing. While Ditka had high hopes for him, it was clear that he was not exactly progressing the way the team would have liked and envisioned when they drafted him, especially when Dunsmore suffered a sprained ankle during a preseason game against the Raiders. Said Ditka on how Dunsmore was doing in camp in his attempt to make the team and beat out Earl, "I think he still has a little apprehension about his knee surgery." It also seemed like Earl was going to make the team because he had a pretty solid preseason. Among all the tight ends on the team that preseason, Earl led the group in receiving, and in one particular game against Kansas City, he was the only tight end with a catch. Plus, Earl, thinking that Dunsmore had a chance to make the team, flat out told Coach Ditka that if this was the direction in which he was leaning, to cut him right now, so he had a chance to stick on another roster. And Ditka didn't cut him. Based on Dunsmore's shaky play in the preseason, Earl's solid play, and Dunsmore's injury, plus Ditka's actions, it seemed like Earl was going to be back in Chicago for his 7th season. But when it was time for the Chicago Bears to make some roster cuts, sure enough, Robin Earl found his name on the list. Ditka knew what Earl could do, and wanted to go with a younger player with more potential. In fact, Ditka viewed Dunsmore so highly that on his draft board, he had Dunsmore as the number 2 tight end, only behind Tony Hunter, the Notre Dame tight end who went in the first round with the 12th overall pick to the Buffalo Bills. And let's just say that Robin Earl did not exactly take too kindly to the news that he was no longer employed by the Chicago Bears. Keep in mind, even though Earl was no longer a Bear, he still had a shot of latching on to some other NFL team due to his history and how well he played in the preseason. Heck, Dunsmore didn't stay healthy. He was not exactly the healthiest fellow, as evidenced by that 1983 offseason and preseason. So if he got hurt, you had to figure Earl was going to be the next man up. But everything that transpired over the next 24 hours might have destroyed that chance forever. For one, the moment that Earl got cut, he ripped Ditka to shreds in the press. Granted, Earl and Ditka weren't on the greatest of terms as it was. During a preseason game against the Buffalo Bills, Ditka yanked Earl's face mask, which was seen as wrong back in 1983, let alone in today's day and age. Ditka apologized for that. But Earl felt like Ditka lied to him and deceived him, and that he was better than Dunsmore and deserved to make the team. Said Earl, "Mike told me he made a commitment in May, and he was going to stick with it. Mike said I played better than Dunsmore. I wish he had let me go earlier. He promised me he would, but he told me in the game of football there's a lot of BS." But Earl wasn't done yet. Not only was he not happy about the cut, but he wasn't happy about the way he was cut, because he didn't find out until Tuesday that he was gone, even though the team notified the league of his release on Monday night at the deadline. Now, there are actual reasons for why you would do this. If the deadline is Monday night, and the players leave the facility on Monday afternoon, and you let them know that they were cut on Monday night, it's going to be at home via telephone call, which number one, feels super impersonal, and number two, means they have the playbook in their possession at their home and might not return it. They could do whatever they want with the playbook at that point. So this practice of cutting guys by a Monday night deadline and only letting them know about the decision on Tuesday was nothing crazy or out of the ordinary. Still, Earl was furious, saying, "I told Mike this morning that there's a lot of grumbling. Maybe I trusted Mike too much. He gave me his word that he would release me 2 or 3 weeks before the last cut, so I could try and catch on elsewhere. But I think now he kept me around for competition at the position." Alright, so Robin Earl just burned that bridge with Ditka and the Bears. I can't say that's the worst way to handle a cut, but it's definitely one of the worst ways. Ditka basically told Earl to shut up, saying, "By releasing all these veterans, we're taking the club in a different direction. We might have made some mistakes, but I feel these are the people who are going to play for me." So, like many NFL players on this day who went to the facility with a job and left without one, Robin Earl was joining them, although he did it in a bizarre way where he had to lash out at the media. Then again, Earl was always an outspoken type. In 1981, he talked about how he was the lowest paid tight end in football, making $75,000, and how he wanted to be paid more. To which general manager Jim Finks said, if he was the lowest paid tight end in the NFL last year, maybe he should have been. He's a long way from being a polished tight end. He can't be running scared. So Earl definitely thought a bit highly of himself, and this move was a blow for that reason. But if that was all that happened, then this is a non-story. Players get cut all the time. And sure, Earl was angrier about it and more outspoken about it than most. But this would just be a footnote 4 decades later. Earl will be remembered as one of the lead blockers from Walter Payton, and a man who carved out a decent career in the NFL for over half a decade, and that would be that. However, Earl was furious about the news and decided to forget about what just happened by doing something incredibly stupid and incredibly dangerous. That's right, he got behind the wheel and drank his sorrows away. Because Earl, upset about the events that transpired earlier in the day, and upset about not being on an NFL roster at this moment for the first time since he got drafted in 1977, drank and drove. We don't know whether he was driving back from the team facility when this happened, or from a bar, or driving somewhere from his home or whatnot, but what we do know is that on the night of August 30th, or early morning on August 31st at 12:15 a.m., so 15 minutes past midnight, when he got cut, he was driving his car and was swerving in traffic. He was driving in Fox River Grove on US 14 when he was pulled over for improper lane use. After getting pulled over, the cops suspected that he was drunk since he was swerving in traffic, so they asked Earl to take a breathalyzer test. When he refused to take a breathalyzer test, he was arrested and was sent to the Montgomery County Jail, where he stayed the night. Just like that, Robin Earl was arrested for drunk driving. When August 30th started, he was a player with an NFL job and was a player with, at least from everything I could find, a clean slate and no criminal record. When August 30th ended, he was a player without a job, without a way back to Chicago after burning that bridge with Ditka, and a person with a record who was booked for drunk driving. That's quite the eventful 24 hours, and not in a good way whatsoever. As one writer said, dealing with a visit by the Turk, as in, the man who informs you that you've been cut, is not an easy thing. Exhibit A in this case is tight end Robin Earl. Earl did not take his demotion well at all. Understatement of the century right there. Understatement of the century. And in terms of what happened after the incident involving the man who played the first 6 years of his career with this team behind me right here, in Robin Earl and the Chicago Bears, well, his NFL career was done after that. He never played another down in the National Football League. Didn't sign on anywhere in 1983. That was it. He did play 2 seasons in the United States Football League with the Birmingham Stallions, where he recorded 15 catches in 1984 and 1985 combined. But after that, that was it. No more NFL games for him. No more roster spots for him. Maybe things would have gone differently if he reacted, quite literally, any other way, where he didn't bash his coach, didn't lash out at the media, and then drive drunk and swerve into traffic. Most of the time, when a player gets cut, I don't want to say they take the news well, but they don't do, well, whatever the heck Robin Earl did on this day. Want to know the fastest way to get yourself out of the NFL and not get picked up by another team, destroying your legacy in the process? Bash the team that just cut you, bash the way they did things even though it was pretty understandable protocol considering the circumstances, and then drive drunk. Robin Earl went from an NFL player and a contributing tight end to out of the league, never to be heard from again in a matter of one day. It was a horrible, no good, very bad day for Robin Earl, as he had the 24 hours from hell, some of which was not his choice, obviously, since he didn't decide to get cut, and some of which was absolutely his choice, where he made poor decision after poor decision and torpedoed his career as a result. Because on this August day in 1983, upon hearing the announcement, this former Bear was barely hanging on. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.